Fake news indeed. A great piece by Dean Obadella over at the Daily Beast. Mr. President, a terrorist is on trial right now. You know, the president is saying terrorist incidents are underreported. He says a trial began in federal court on Monday of a radical religious cleric who allegedly plotted to kill Americans of another faith to prove his commitment to our God, his words. Why haven't you heard about this, you might be asking? Could it be, as Donald Trump claimed Monday, that the dishonest media is not covering all radical Islamic terror plots? No, the actual reason is the man on trial in Tennessee Federal District Court is not Muslim. Rather, he is a self-professed Christian minister, Robert Doggart. He's a dangerous man. Undercover agents allege that Doggart was plotting. I'm sharing with you from Dean Obadella's piece. That Doggart was plotting to travel to upstate New York to kill Muslims there using explosives, an M4 assault rifle, and even a machete to cut the infidels to shreds. The FBI's investigation also found that Doggart viewed himself as a religious warrior who wanted to kill Muslims to show his commitment to his Christian God. Doggart even boasted that the attack on Muslims, quote, will be cruel and we will burn down their buildings, and if anybody attempts to harm us in any way, we will take them down, end quote. Interestingly enough, if you do, at least I haven't done this in the last hour or so, but Dean Obadella says if you do a Google search, this is presumably a day or so ago when he wrote this article, of Robert Doggart, the only story that you find is from the local Tennessee media outlet. But back in September, 3 men known as the Crusaders, Dean writes, as in the Christian Crusaders, were arrested for plotting to kill Muslim refugees in Kansas. In December, white supremacist Glendon Scott Crawford was sentenced to 30 years to life for trying to build a radioactive weapon to kill Muslim Americans. And all this comes only a week and a half after an anti-immigrant Canadian man who had expressed his support for Trump online walked into a Quebec mosque and opened fire, murdering 6 Muslims and wounding a whole bunch more. And, a word from anybody, the president, the press, not so much. So here we have all these examples of right-wing terrorism happening in the United States. In fact, according to the FBI, since 9/11, more people have been killed by right-wing terrorists than by Muslims. So what are we to make of articles like Kurt Schlichter's piece over at townhall.com titled, "The Left Hates You, Act Accordingly"? I find this fascinating. He writes, they hate you. Leftists don't merely disagree with you. They don't merely feel you are misguided. They don't merely think you are wrong. They hate you. They want you enslaved and obedient, if not dead. Once you get that, everything that is happening now will make sense, and you will understand what you need to be ready to do. Oh, really? Now, I think you could argue from a psychological point of view that this is a classic case of projection. People are literally only able to see the world through their own eyes. Empathy is a great thing, empathy being sort of the ability to see the world through somebody else's eyes or walk in their moccasins or feel through their skin or whatever. But it has its limits. And so, we always tend to assume that other people are acting in ways that we ourselves would act. I remember when I was like 7 years old and I was in 2nd grade, and a kid accused me of stealing his pencil box. And the teacher, brought me up to the front of the class and dressed me, and I hadn't done it. And I was just shattered by this. I went home and I was just really upset. And my dad sat me down and he said, everybody judges you by themselves. He said, if that kid, is just assuming that it turned out the kid had lost it, and he found it actually in his own coat in his, later on in the day. So I was sort of vindicated, but it still stung. But he said, people who steal assume other people will steal. It gives you an insight into their personality. He said, people who walk around thinking about sex all day assume everybody walks around thinking about sex all day. Well, maybe everybody does. I don't know. But, my dad gave me like a whole bunch of examples. I don't remember all of them. I was 7 years old, but I remember that really vividly. And that was when I learned about projection. He didn't talk about Sigmund Freud. He didn't talk about, the origins of hysteria and all this kind of stuff. But so that's Kurt Schlichter's piece over at Town Hall. I'll share a little more of it with you. I also want to kind of, in between, share with you a piece from chapter 10 of a rather famous book. In this book, well, I'll read you the first paragraph from chapter 10 with the note, with the proviso that two words, actually in this first chapter, only one word has been changed. And I'll explain that to you after I read it. It must be admitted that all this was partly the result of extraordinarily crafty tactics on the part of liberals on the one hand, and obvious official stupidity or naivete on the other hand. The liberals were too clever to allow a simultaneous attack to be made on the whole of their press. No one section functioned as cover for the other. The national papers, also in liberal hands, knew how to camouflage themselves as model examples of objectivity. They studiously avoided harsh language, knowing well that blockheads are capable of judging only by external appearances and never able to penetrate the real depth and meaning of anything. This form of human frailty was carefully studied and understood by the liberal press. Well, that was from Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, chapter 10, and I simply replaced the word Jew with the word liberal. And going forward, replace the word Nazi with the word conservative and the word Germany with the word America. And this is what you get, the next paragraph. Certainly in days to come, the liberals will raise a tremendous cry throughout their newspapers. Once a hand is laid on their favorite nest, once a move is made to put an end to the scandalous liberal press, and once this instrument which shapes public opinion is brought under conservative control and no longer in the hands of liberals and enemies of the people, I am certain that this will be much easier for us than it was for our fathers. The scream of the 12-inch shrapnel is more penetrating than the hiss of 1,000 liberal newspaper vipers. Therefore, let them go on with their hissing. What soon gave me cause for very serious consideration, writes Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, were the activities of the liberals in certain branches of life, into the mystery of which I penetrated little by little. Was there any shady undertaking, any form of foulness, especially in cultural life, in which at least one liberal did not participate? On putting the probing knife carefully to that kind of abscess, one immediately discovered, like a magnet in a putrescent body, a little liberal who was often blinded by the sudden light. In my eyes, the charge of liberalism became a grave one the moment I discovered the liberal activities in the press, in art, in literature, and the theater. All unctuous protests were more or less futile. Here was a pestilence, a moral pestilence, with which the public was being infected. I was happy to know, at last for certain, that a liberal is not an American. Now, of course, what he said was that a Jew is not a German. But it's the Reich, the right. So back to Kurt Schlichter. In his The Left Hates You Act Accordingly. You are normal and therefore a heretic, he's writing to his conservative friends. You refuse to bow to their idols, to subscribe to their twisted catechisms, to praise their false god. This is unforgivable. You must burn. Crazy talk? Just ask them. Go ahead. Go on social media. Find a leftist. It's easy. Just say something positive about America or Jesus, and they'll come swarming like locusts. They will tell you that Christians are idiots and veterans are scum, that normals are subhumans whose role is to labor as serfs to subsidize the progressive elite and its clients. They are ISIS, except with hashtags instead of AKs, committed to the establishment of a leftist caliphate. Kurt Schlichter writes. You can read this over at townhall.com. They are fanatics, and by not surrendering, by not kneeling, by not obeying, you have committed an unpardonable sin. You have defied the left, and you must be broken. They will take your job, slander your name, even beat or kill you. Whatever it takes to break you and terrify others by making you an example. They must crush this rebellion of the normal, and absolutely nothing is off the table. So the only outcome is that one side wins and the other loses. There's no truce to be had, no possibility of a tie. They hate us. And however they come at us, we need to be prepared to fight. It's an abbreviated version. You can read the entire article, as I said, over at townhall.com. And of course, you can read Hitler's words over at Mein Kampf, which actually is now really selling well, along with more cautionary tales like They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer and The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt, which I strongly encourage you to check out. It's an amazing time we live in. What do we do with this? What do we do with this kind of projection, this kind of hatred?